Greetings, my name is Emma, and today I will share an unforgettable experience from my past. Each time I contemplate it, my heart suffers and I am unable to cease self-reproach. It is a narrative I regret having endured. However, life seldom offers ease to individuals. Many years ago, at the age of 18, I resided with my family in London, a magnificent city replete with shadowy corners where I believed I possessed everything. My family has considerable riches. Both of my parents are accomplished individuals. My father is an industrious entrepreneur. My mother is an interior designer with exceptional taste. Notwithstanding their demanding schedules, my parents consistently endeavor to provide time for me and my twin boys, Jack and Mateo. They are 2 years my senior, and I can only characterize them as exceptionally gorgeous and lovely. I have always taken pride in having two brothers such as them. My parents indulged me as the youngest child in the family. Although my parents provided me with everything, from material possessions to affection, I have always perceived that their love, despite its magnitude, could not rival the love my two brothers had for me. They are not merely my brothers. They are also my protectors and buddies, consistently safeguarding and sheltering me. I believe my two brothers love me more than my parents do, due to their consistent demonstrations of care and concern through gestures and actions. While my parents express their love by ensuring I lead a fulfilling and pleasant life, Jack and Mateo consistently exceed those expectations. They comprehend my emotions in a manner that my parents occasionally do not when I am despondent. They consistently observe, even in the absence of my verbal expression. When I require a confidant, they consistently listen without prejudice. During my childhood, whether I experienced a fall or faced bullying at school, Jack and Mateo consistently defended me. On one occasion, my classmates ridiculed me for the dress I wore, and upon returning home in tears, my two brothers not only consoled me, but also went to school to reprimand those students. They accomplished it not via violence, but via incisive language and a frigid demeanor. This instilled in those individuals a profound reluctance to approach me again. In my view, they resembled heroes, perpetually prepared to assist any time I required their support. I recall the evenings when the entire family would convene. However, I preferred to sit between Jack and Mateo. They consistently embraced me tightly, occasionally competing for the privilege of sitting beside me. They frequently jested that I was their little princess, and that it was their lifelong duty to safeguard her. Over time, I perceived that their affection was distinct from that of other family members. They were the initial individuals to assist me in navigating the challenges of puberty when I felt self-conscious about my appearance. Mateo dedicated the evening to instructing me on the application of subtle cosmetics, affirming my beauty without necessitating any modifications. Jack assisted me in selecting appropriate attire, consistently praising me as the most adorable younger sister globally. They instilled in me a sense of uniqueness and provided unwavering affection. To me, my two brothers were not merely relatives. They were my primary source of emotional support during my parents' professional commitments. Jack and Mateo accompanied me to school, assisted me with my homework, and consistently ensured that I did not experience loneliness. I often knocked on their door during sleepless nights, and they consistently greeted me with warmth. They would recount amusing anecdotes, or merely remain beside me till I drifted off to sleep. The seemingly insignificant gestures convinced me that their affection for me surpassed anything I had experienced from my parents. Nonetheless, that love, which I once perceived as innocent and benign, became the origin of my enduring torment, though recounting that narrative would require additional time. I am uncertain if others will comprehend, but the events that transpired when I was 18 were a pivotal moment that irrevocably altered the course of my life. I shall proceed when I possess the fortitude to confront the remainder of that recollection. I remember it clearly because we were always together. As the youngest member of the family, I frequently engaged in foolish behavior without apprehension of reprimand. Occasionally, I would abruptly embrace them or nonchalantly take a seat on their laps when I observed them sitting nearby. Not only were Jack and Mateo my siblings, but they were also my closest friends, people I felt comfortable showing affection towards. That afternoon, a bright summer day, I had just exited the bedroom. Sunlight streamed through the huge living room window, producing a calm, agreeable ambiance. Jack and Mateo were seated on the sofa, engrossed in television. I was unaware of their viewing content, although both appeared highly concentrated as a matter of routine. I approached absent-mindedly, rubbing my eyes. I remained silent and approached them quietly on tiptoe. As I drew near, I observed that Jack and Mateo remained oblivious to my presence. I grinned playfully, leapt onto the sofa, and positioned myself on both of their laps. Jack was shocked at that moment, and he burst into laughter. "What are you doing now, younger sister?" I merely chuckled, remained silent, and settled comfortably on their laps, putting my head on Jack's shoulder. "What are you both observing with such focus?" I inquired, but did not obtain an instant response. Upon observing the television screen, I discerned that it was a romantic film, and at that instant, the narrative was approaching its climax. The scene brimmed with emotion as the two protagonists embraced, their eyes ablaze before sharing a passionate kiss. Jack and Mateo, seemingly aware of my gaze, appeared perplexed. Mateo, with a shy smile, swiftly covered my eyes with his hand, exclaiming, "Don't look, Emma, this is not a children's movie." I chuckled, attempting to extricate myself from Mateo's hold, asserting, "I am no longer a child, I am 18. I spoke with a hint of teasing, but I found the situation quite intriguing. I attempted to see past Mateo's fingers to continue observing while simultaneously smiling and jesting with them. At this time, I instinctively placed my hand on Mateo's leg to maintain my equilibrium. Whether intended or not, my hand inadvertently contacted an object within his pocket. The firm and warm sensation startled me, causing my heart to race, and I promptly withdrew my hand. I refrained from looking up at Mateo or Jack. "I apologize," I stuttered. I abruptly stood and hurried to my room. I forcefully closed the door, pressing my back against it, as my heart raced as if I had committed an error. I seated myself on the bed, apprehensive about the recent events. I pondered whether the image of the remote control in Mateo's pocket persistently occupied my thoughts, causing my face to flush. Was I overthinking, or was it really an accident? Unbeknownst to me, the sensations of humiliation and embarrassment inhibited my departure from the room. I was uncertain of Jack and Mateo's perception of me following this. They might dismiss it with laughter. Nevertheless, the image relentlessly haunted me, not because of my physical contact with that object, but because of the profound humiliation I felt upon recognizing that I had gotten so complacent that I had transgressed a boundary I had never previously contemplated. It was the first occasion I perceived that the bond between my two brothers, while still intimate, appeared to possess a delicate limit that I had not previously recognized before that evening. After secluding myself in my room for some time, I resolved to descend to the living room. I began to feel hungry, aware that my family was likely awaiting my presence for dinner, although I still had a degree of embarrassment from the afternoon's occurrences. I pondered whether Jack and Mateo were reflecting on the incident. However, I reassured myself that it might not be as grave as I imagined. Perhaps they had overlooked it. I discreetly opened the door and crept down the corridor. I aimed to avoid making eye contact at this juncture. As I approached the living room, I halted and listened for any sounds emanating from within. The living room appeared vacant, and I exhaled in relief. I presumed they were likely in the kitchen or elsewhere, no longer attentive to my presence. I stealthily entered the living room, scanning the area, apprehensive of seeing their gaze. Although unexpectedly, no one was present. How peculiar, I mused, as I halted before the sofa, where I had seated myself with them that afternoon. I was attempting to ascertain the television station when abruptly 2 faces leaned down, gazing in the same direction as I was. "What activity are you currently involved in, Emma?" Mateo's voice resonated directly beside my ear, startling me. Jack chuckled heartily from the opposite side, remarking, "You resemble a thief." I emitted a brief scream in astonishment, pivoting to find both of them directly behind me. Their abrupt emergence nearly caused my heart to cease, and we all 3 startled simultaneously. Mateo and Jack gazed at me before erupting in laughter, while I clutched my chest, simultaneously frightened and amused. "Oh my God, you 2 terrified me," I exclaimed, pretending to be angry and serious. But I couldn't help but laugh, feeling as if someone had unexpectedly teased me. "What is your perspective? It looks like you're working on something." Shady Jack arched his eyebrows with a playful smile, while Mateo affectionately caressed my head. "Are you not intending to consume anything?" I also laughed. At this moment, the discomfort from the afternoon appeared to dissipate. Since they were laughing, I thought what I had touched couldn't be what I thought. That notion elicited a sigh of comfort from me. I attempted to behave as if nothing had occurred. I was merely verifying if anyone was present. I beamed, attempting to redirect the conversation. "What are you both doing behind me? Are you attempting to instill fear in me?" Jack feigned seriousness with a shrug. "Indeed, I intended to frighten you slightly, but I did not anticipate your reaction," Mateo remarked, his tone laced with playful mockery. "Who could have anticipated your sudden leap? Your expression was exceedingly amusing, prompting the 3 of us to erupt in laughter. The atmosphere grew increasingly jubilant. At that point, Mateo placed his hand on my shoulder and stated, "All right, let's proceed to dine. The entire family awaits your arrival." I accepted, smiled, and accompanied them into the kitchen. The entire family gathered around the dinner table. My parents both smiled warmly upon my arrival. I seated myself in the chair. The kitchen's soft illumination instilled a sense of warmth and tranquility in me. Laughter consistently infused the family's talk during supper. My parents discussed their occupations, while Jack and Mateo sometimes jested with me through mild humor. I also participated in such an environment. The sensations of guilt and embarrassment from the afternoon appeared to have been non-existent. Upon completing dinner, I assisted my mother in washing the dishes, and subsequently retired to my room to prepare for bed early. Reclining on the bed, I reflected on the events that transpired this afternoon during the recent tease. Despite feeling somewhat ashamed, I no longer experienced anxiety. I reassured myself with a smile, affirming that everything would be fine. Jack and Mateo remain the finest brothers I have ever known, and thus I succumbed to slumber happily. The situation seemed to have reached its conclusion. However, his chamber was only divided by a weak wall. Minimal sounds, ranging from films to music, might effortlessly permeate. One morning, I was known in the household for sleeping until 9 or even 10 a.m. Awoke abruptly at 7 a.m. Initially, I believed I was emerging from an indistinct dream, or perhaps the sunlight filtering through the curtains was disorienting me. Nevertheless, after a few moments of clarity, I discerned an unusual sound emanating from the adjacent room. In a classically designed house, my room stood between Jack and Mateo's. The walls separating the rooms were rather thin, allowing sounds from one room to easily permeate into another. I was accustomed to hearing them engage in gaming or conversing. However, this morning, the sound I detected was markedly different. It was an unusual noise, subdued yet sufficiently distinct to capture my attention. Initially, I reclined on the bed, assuming they were merely watching an action film. Yet, after a few minutes, I sensed something amiss. The sound did not resemble gunfire, explosions, or any typical cinematic audio. Rather, it was intermittent, varying in duration from prolonged to rapid bursts. My heart began to race, and a thought surged through my thoughts, causing my face to flush. I was reluctant to accept my thoughts. However, the sound grew increasingly distinct. The sound was neither music nor ordinary conversation. Despite the wall obstructing it, I could still discern alluring rapid noises intermingled with labored breathing. I endeavored to suppress thoughts that were inappropriate, although the more I listened, the more convinced I became that my two brothers were seeing a particular film. A sensation of guilt and humiliation enveloped me. I questioned why I was up at this hour and why my heart was racing fiercely, as if it may explode while my entire body felt ablaze. I raised my hands to shield my face, attempting to eliminate the intrusive thoughts in my mind. This is private. Such occurrences are not uncommon. I have witnessed similar events myself. I reassured myself in an attempt to quell the inner conflict, although what intensified my discomfort was the sounds emanating from my brother's chamber. We had consistently maintained a deep and intimate relationship, and I never anticipated encountering a situation of this nature. I wished to cease hearing it, yet the sound persisted, growing increasingly distinct. I rose up, exited the bed, and discreetly opened the door to my room. The oppressive sensation in my heart rendered it untenable for me to remain motionless any longer. I moved quietly down the hallway, attempting to minimize noise, but upon reaching my brother's room, the sound intensified as if the wall no longer divided us. I remained motionless before the door, experiencing embarrassment and confusion. My heart raced, and my thoughts were chaotic. I recognized that this was likely a commonplace occurrence, one that everyone had encountered. Yet hearing it from my brother's room left me uncertain about how to respond. I quietly bit my lips, contemplating whether to return to my room or remain here as an inquisitive observer. I leaned against the door, attempting to inhale deeply to soothe myself, although my rapid breathing and the indistinct sounds threatened to obliterate any rational thoughts within me. Part of me wanted to hurry back, but those sounds held back another part of me, keeping me from leaving. Suddenly, the door of the room burst open. I recoiled, nearly incapacitated to respond. Mateo appeared directly before me, his eyes widened in astonishment. He looked as if someone had just apprehended him for an inappropriate act. Leaving me utterly perplexed and at a loss for words, we remained in silence, facing one another for several seconds that felt interminable. The stillness was so oppressive that breathing became difficult. Mateo cleared his throat in an attempt to alleviate the strain. "Emma, why are you standing here?" His voice was agitated and subdued, evidently attempting to maintain composure while revealing his shame. He lifted his hand to scratch his head, averting his gaze as though reluctant to meet my eyes. Mateo's face blushed slightly, revealing his profound embarrassment. My heart raced and my entire body ignited. I averted my gaze, hesitant to meet his eyes, and could only mutter, I was merely passing by. My response was evidently unpersuasive, yet it was the sole thought that came to mind at that moment. At that moment, the noise within the room abruptly ceased, and Jack emerged from behind Mateo. His expression mirrored Mateo's, characterized by timidity and perplexity. He regarded me, then cast a fleeting look toward Mateo, seemingly seeking an explanation, although no one spoke. Over 3 of us remained stationary, enveloped in a stiflingly uncomfortable ambiance. I attempted to produce a strained smile, raking my hand through my hair to conceal my shame. I merely passed by, I reiterated, my voice quivering slightly. I did not provide any information. I am departing. I swiftly turned and departed, seeking to extricate myself from the uncomfortable situation expeditiously. Although I refrained from looking back, I sensed their gaze upon me as if they were uncertain of how to proceed following the recent events. I went back to my room, closed the door, and leaned against it, feeling a sense of relief, but my heart was still racing. An unusual, mortifying sensation surged throughout me, and I was unable to cease contemplating that time. Upon returning to my room, I seated myself on the bed, my mind in a state of turmoil filled with various thoughts. The recent incident vividly replayed in my mind. Mateo's bashful demeanor as he opened the door, Jack's gaze upon his exit, and the palpable tension among the 3 of us. All of it rendered me unable to find tranquility. I contemplated their thoughts about me at that point. They likely experienced embarrassment akin to mine, perhaps even more intensely. However, my inadvertent eavesdropping on conversations not intended for my ears caused me the most discomfort, although it may have been merely an ironic moment. I was afraid that it would create an uncomfortable impression between my 2 brothers, whom I have always regarded as my closest and most cherished friends. I covered my face with my hands, attempting to dispel the negative ideas. Nevertheless, the more I endeavored to forget them, the more they reverberated in my mind. I reassured myself that this was merely an unforeseen circumstance that no one desired, and that perhaps I was exacerbating the problem unnecessarily. I rose and traversed the room, seeking a method to alleviate this oppressive sensation. It was merely an accident. It signifies nothing, I murmured to myself in an attempt to reassure myself. However, regardless of my reassurances, I felt compelled to take action to restore normalcy and alleviate any potential awkwardness between us. Shortly thereafter, I heard a knock at the door. I figured it was Jack or Mateo, since my parents never knocked to get my attention. I inhaled deeply, attempting to compose myself prior to opening the door. Mateo remained stationary, appearing embarrassed, his gaze averted, yet he was evidently attempting to restore his calm. He rubbed his head, a clumsy smile on his face. "Emma, I apologize for the past incident. It is not as you perceive. Jack and I were merely watching a movie. The time may have been inappropriate." I remained motionless for several seconds, gazing at Mateo. Mateo's face flushed, his doubtful gaze conveying bewilderment in every word he uttered. Jack approached and positioned himself directly behind Mateo. He glanced at me, then at Mateo, seemingly searching for an appropriate explanation. However, Jack's ashamed demeanor was far more pronounced than Mateo's. We remained silent, enveloped by timidity in a suffocating atmosphere. I recognized that if this situation persisted, the discomfort would only intensify, so I resolved to intervene. I smiled slightly, feeling ashamed while striving to appear nonchalant. "Come now, I did not intend it." I spoke this with a light tone. "Do not appear so uptight. I was merely passing through. Mateo and Jack exchanged glances as though they were conveying messages through their eyes. After a few seconds, Mateo sighed and smiled faintly. "Really, Emma, you don't feel uncomfortable," I responded, immediately attempting to alleviate both of their embarrassments. Then, I thought of an idea to keep things from getting more awkward. I took Mateo's hand and pointed at Jack. "Come to my room. The three of us can talk for a bit. Okay, consider it making up for all this awkwardness." My suggestion surprised them, but they nodded as if it was the only way to diffuse the tension. I smiled, turned, and walked into my room. The two of them slowly followed. As the three of us sat on the bed, I decided to lighten the mood by making a joke. I looked at Jack and teased. "So, the movie was really good, to the point where you both lost track of time." Jack laughed awkwardly, covering his face with his hands. "Come on, Emma, stop teasing me. It's just we didn't think you'd hear." "I genuinely believed that you had increased the volume so that I could hear," I remarked, raising my eyebrows in a playful manner, eliciting a laugh from both of us. The smile seemed to erase the awkwardness from earlier. After talking for a while, my curiosity was sometimes challenging to control, especially when I heard the two of them watching a movie. I looked at them, unsure if I should share the thought that had just crossed my mind. After a moment of hesitation, I gathered my courage and hesitantly said, "How about we try doing it like in that movie? The words that came out of my mouth startled me. Though I wasn't sure how they'd react, curiosity overcame my shyness. They turned to look at me, their eyes filled with surprise. "Are you serious?" Mateo asked, his voice a little confused, as if he couldn't believe I had such a bold idea. I nodded, trying to keep my expression serious. "I was just curious. It wouldn't hurt to try, right?" I said, my voice fading. Jack responded immediately, his voice full of determination, not daring to look directly at them. They both turned away, trying to avoid my gaze, but I was patient, not giving up. I gently squeezed Jack and Mateo's hands as a way to reassure both them and myself that just try it once. I want to know what it really feels like. Jack and Mateo were silent. I could see the conflict in their eyes. After a while, Mateo sighed, looking somewhat helpless. "Okay, but just this once. And we have to keep it a secret. No one knows," he said, his voice low, as if to make sure I understood the boundaries of this room. Suddenly, it became quiet. Only our breathing remained. I felt my heart pounding, each beat echoing in my chest. We began to try every action. Every gesture was careful, but also full of charm. I don't know how much time passed, but it seemed like everything happened very quickly, as if the whole world around us disappeared, leaving only us. When it was over,